I've often found in companies where they have brilliant ideas, they start off with some very innovative solutions, but then over a period of time, those processes that work great were no longer as effective. And for whatever reason, the motivation, the drive, the excitement was no longer there to make sure that they again review and rebuild or reinvigorate those processes. So that's been some of my experiences when I have been engaging with my clients. Now, coming back to you again, Josh. So let's say if you were to advise companies in terms of specific steps that they should be taking, concrete steps. I kept talking about commitment, preparedness, and discipline. If you were to translate these into concrete steps, what would they be?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm talking to a board, I'd like to keep it very simple. AI handles the noise, so your experts can handle the judgment where it actually matters, the hard, high stakes items. So if we're looking at a roadmap to try to implement this technology, the technology is ready, right? I work with it every day. I see a wide range of customers. Some are using millions and millions of automated actions per year, and they've really automated all the noise out of their environment. And now they're moving on to the really advanced stuff. But to start, you have to find the high frequency, low judgment work. You want to start where that return on investment is obvious and the risk is also low. Because like you were saying with your CPD framework, you have to get that leadership commitment involved, and they have to trust that an automated system is going to help them. Whether it's going to solve all of their cybersecurity concerns on day one, right? That's not something that we're trying to promise here with this technology. What we're trying to do is use it to help do the things that really nobody's going to miss doing, right? The password resets and the things like that that are just monotonous, repetitive tasks, onboarding, offboarding, verification of user access reviews, those kind of things nobody's going to miss. So if we start there, we can build the commitment framework, right? We can start that governance. Next is really defining the clear thresholds. Actually decide, what does high confidence mean for an agentic system in real numbers, right? So an action can trigger on its own without you having to pull people into a meeting or ask for approvals. Once you've kind of done those things, you can move to establishing the guardrails, the boundaries. You want to define the box that your AI agent gets to operate in. If that starts out as read-only access and providing context into all of your alerts, great. That's a good place to start. And as you build out those systems, you will start to naturally trust that the AI is actually able to understand your environment and it knows what it has to escalate. So that is kind of the next step, is those guardrails, and start small. Pilot it somewhere where that controlled low risk action can be done. And then run the agents in like a recommended mode where they just plan out what they're going to do. And then someone can go and approve whether or not that needs to happen.
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast Series with Dr. Dave Chatterjee. Dr. Chatterjee is the author of the book Cybersecurity Readiness, a holistic and high-performance approach, a Sage publication. He has been studying cybersecurity for over a decade, authored and edited scholarly papers, delivered talks, conducted webinars and workshops, consulted with companies, and served on a cybersecurity SWAT team with Chief Information Security Officers. His work on proactive cybersecurity has been featured on USA Today. Dr. Chatterjee has been a tenured professor at the Terry College of Business at the University of Georgia. As a Duke University visiting scholar, Dr. Chatterjee teaches in the cybersecurity programs at the Pratt School of Engineering.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast Series. I'm your host, Dave Chatterjee. Let me open with a question that sits at the heart of everything we are discussing today. What happens when the people we once depended on to fight cyber threats can no longer keep up with the volume, the velocity, and the variety of what is hitting them. The modern Security Operations Center, SOC, was built on a human model. Skilled analysts reviewing alerts, making judgment calls, escalating to management, and containing threats. For years, that model worked, but the arithmetic has changed. The attack surface has grown exponentially. Threat actors have automated their operations. AI-assisted attacks arrive faster than any human analyst can process them. And the analysts on the front lines are burning out at rates our industry has never seen before. In other words, the current model is not just failing at the edges, it is failing at the center. The question is not whether the current model is sustainable. The evidence is already in. The question is what replaces it and what role humans play in a security operation that increasingly depends on AI agents to execute at machine speed. My guest today is Joshua Weinick. I'm going to refer to him as Josh during our conversation. He is an AI automation engineer at BlinkOps, an organization at the leading edge of agentic security automation. Josh has been working on the precise problem our audience is grappling with, and that is, how do you redesign the human role in security when AI can execute faster, more consistently, and at greater scale than any analyst team? Josh, welcome to the episode.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a delight to have you. It's been a pleasure knowing you. I've had a chance to listen to one of your presentations at a conference, and you're a brilliant presenter. So I know that my audience will enjoy listening to you. But before we get into the substance of the discussion, please share some of your professional highlights with my listeners. In particular, I'd like to hear about your time at Ernst Young, embedded in Fortune 500 SOCs, and what that experience with legacy automation taught you that shapes how you think about AI-driven security today.
Sure, absolutely. So my career started in cybersecurity consulting, kind of at a high level, doing all kinds of threat mappings, designing solutions that could help secure operations centers understand what they're facing, right? So the amount of detections and alerts that are coming in as we shifted from the on-prem to cloud environments, everything started changing, right? We received alerts from a ton of new tools that we didn't really always have before. So now we have all these extra alerts that people didn't know how to handle. So we worked on creating processes and automations using those legacy SOAR platforms that you mentioned to automate those tasks. One of the challenges we always had was we had to spend a lot of time designing resilient systems that, like you said, would handle edge cases well. And once those automations would encounter a new edge case that we didn't design for, the entire automation pipeline would break. And when that happens, the default is to return back to human looking at the raw log or the raw alert, and then having to do all of the triage, investigation, and response processes all by hand. And additionally, the legacy SOAR platforms, without having AI embedded in them at all, meant that everything needed to be Python code and was very rigid. And if you designed a process to, let's say, handle phishing emails out of an Outlook mailbox, and then all of a sudden you decided you wanted to change your mail server or your mail system, then you would have to redesign the entire automation process, because all of those fields and all of the information that's being passed between the automation processes would kind of fail and fall behind. So we would spend up to 9 months on a project, and we sometimes would get to month 7, 8, or 9, and then something would change and you'd have to go back and rebuild. And this was a process that kind of repeated on and on. And as AI came into the market, we started to realize that, hey, this new technology is going to be what helps close that automation gap. So that's what drew me over to BlinkOps as a platform that had those capabilities native within the platform. You don't need to architect new MCP servers. All of that extra architecture is built into one place so you can have one location to manage it all.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the current SOC model, Security Operations Center model, is no longer sustainable. The reasoning being there's the volume challenge. The number of alerts that modern security tool generates has far outpaced that any human team can meaningfully review. And I must admit that in the prior episodes, I've been emphatic about human oversight, human intermediation. But the more I think about it, the practicality is as follows. There's just too much volume of intelligence alerts that's coming to an organization's security dashboard, let's say. And it's humanly almost impossible to track each one of them and close that particular alert threat. It's just impossible. So the use of technology is essential. The second failure is the speed. The most dangerous attacks today are designed to move faster than human decision cycles. And what that means is if an organization had the checks and balances in place where humans were integrated into that process and they had to be brought in to make calls based on the alerts received, well, that's a good system to have traditionally. But in reality, sometimes the delay in getting the human to respond to an alert, to take suitable action, is just not acceptable because by then the malware has probably penetrated the system and just gone right in and gotten itself deposited in multiple systems, considering that these days many systems are highly integrated. So that's one of the challenges of dealing with integrated systems. Finally, the third problem that creates challenges with the traditional SOC model is the cognitive problem. What that essentially means, we're talking about alert fatigue. The analysts are burning out. They're tiring over seeing tons and tons of alerts, trying to evaluate them, make calls on them. So it's causing a tremendous amount of burnout. People are leaving their careers in SOC and looking for other opportunities, which is something that the security industry can ill afford. So given these challenges, Josh, I'd like to turn it back to you. What solutions are being offered? And feel free to share what your firm is offering as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think all three of those challenges that you mentioned are somewhat related, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on the first hand, attacks are becoming much faster, maybe because adversaries are leveraging AI to make decisions on their behalf, because let's be honest, they don't really care what happens to the target system. So they don't mind if AI is going to kind of move laterally very quickly, make extra calls to those systems to see what they can get back. And the human in the loop, which was the second part, is starting to kind of fall apart from a solution standpoint because it's not really working. So what I'm starting to see my customers and clients are more interested in is actually something like a human after the loop, right? Where you have an agentic system that is able to take action first, and then quickly someone is able to review what that agent had done and could possibly revert one or more steps that it had taken. And this helps because if there's a human in the loop step that, let's say, you send a message to a manager and he's on a call for 30 minutes and it takes him, maybe 40 minutes to get back to that request. While it might be easy for him to just respond to that human in the loop prompt, that 40 minutes is the prime time that you have to respond to that alert. There's a lot of articles coming out in the news that attacks are happening within 30 minutes or they're happening in 8 seconds, right? And there's a lot of scare tactic going on here to help you or to push people to purchase new tooling. But really that 40 minutes or hour, if we call it that, then we need to take action within that time frame, and then we can spend time afterwards reviewing what happened. And with agentic systems, with enough guardrails and harnesses around them, you can build systems that can respond in safe ways where the revert step or the amount of changes that it makes are still within a comfortable window. So honestly, it's one of the more exciting shifts that I've seen in security, bringing this technology in, but I want to be careful how I frame it from a practitioner standpoint. And this isn't AI or agents coming to replace security people. It's that the place where humans are adding value to the security process is shifting. We're going from doing the work ourselves, where humans are logging into all the systems and checking everything and copying and pasting and changing tabs and doing all of that, like you said, alert fatigue and analyst burnout work. Instead, we're shifting people's value to actually designing how the work gets done. This way, they're able to actually build systems that respond to alerts, and they can know that that's going to happen within that time frame of an attack. And I think this moment is different because the way security has scaled typically is we add more people, right? So the attack surface now is growing exponentially. It's not just growing at a steady rate. And we would hire, let's say, 1 or 2 new security analysts every year or so. And that was kind of a steady growth. And that's why I worked at a lot of SOCs that maybe had 20 analysts working. And they would all handle 20 to 30 to 50 alerts per day, depending on their area of expertise, right? If you're working something simple like phishing emails, you could probably work a lot of emails in a day. But if you're doing endpoint detection and remediation, you're going to have to spend more time on each alert. But essentially, that growth in the security team was a straight line. And at some point now, that math is just starting to break. And companies are not willing to kind of hire that constant new analyst team and training them. And the AI agents are the first thing that I've actually seen that scales with the problem instead of fighting against it. And that's a pretty big deal. And I'm excited to be here for it. And from a technology standpoint, automation is its own tool set, right? You have tools that are going to handle each endpoint device by installing an agent and monitoring what's going on there. And you're going to have a SIM or a central logging system. And you're going to have cloud detections. And all of these different tools are going to be working. And they might have pieces of automation within them. But the problem is they're not all communicating to a central location at the same time. And SIMs kind of did that for detections, but we don't have anything that does that for enrichment, triage, and response. So what Blink is doing as a platform is sitting on top of that data layer and saying, great, keep all the tools that you're using. They're working well. Keep using them. But when you want to have your EDR platform check with your IAM tool on whether the user who's logging into the endpoint has permissions to these different systems and processes, why don't we have those tools talking together? But on top of that, let's have them talk on a layer that is actually connected to the entire stack. So if there's more information that needs to be gathered from any of your tools at any time, you have one place to do that and see it from. So that's really where the human value is that they're architecting a system that sits on top of all their specialized tools.
That's very interesting and insightful. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to piggyback on a few things you said. And I wanted to emphasize something very poignant. And you said it very well, that we are not talking about replacing people. We're talking about replacing tasks. We are talking about examining the various security tasks that have to be carried out, and then making a call as to who will do it better, a human or a technology. And if the technology will do it better, and when we say technology, we're obviously referring to AI, agentic AI, then let the technology handle the task. Does that mean that we are getting rid of people? No. As you said, it's the people, their minds, their brilliance, their creative abilities that design these systems that perform the different SOC operations. They design the systems, they calibrate the systems, they establish guardrails to make sure the system functions as per specifications. And they also have to build in the checks and balances to ensure that the system doesn't go beyond its scope, or if it gets off the rails, how do you bring it back? What are the recovery plans? So humans have extensive roles to play. It just has to be thought through. And I like the way you put it. You almost said that some of these roles are after the fact or after the incident. But you also mentioned that they play a critical role in helping design these systems. So that begs a question, Josh. As an educator, many of my students are graduating and they're looking for security roles. Many of them get hired at SOC centers, just like probably your career started. So given this shift from the traditional SOC operations to a more agentic AI-driven SOC operations, what does that mean to these graduates? What kinds of roles they are likely to get? And on a related note, what skills will be appreciated by the hiring organization? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I see a lot of that also in the work that we do, where we're often working with those analysts and we're asking them, what do you do to handle X alert? And oftentimes what they answer is they say, well, I copy and paste this from here into here, I go here, I log in. And what we're missing often is the security context and the business context, right? We want to know not only what you're doing from a technical perspective, but we want to know why you're doing it. Why are you enriching this particular IP address? Does it look malicious or does this alert have a process that you think is malicious, or is it accessing some sort of data that should not be leaving the system? And those steps that the analysts are doing really need that reasoning behind them. So the advice that I'd give your students on moving into the security industry is that really try to understand what the security function inside a company is trying to achieve, right? We're not just trying to close out as many alerts per day. We're trying to protect the business in kind of business continuity sense, right? We don't want the systems that are making us or earning us revenue to go down or be unavailable for a set number of time. And we also don't want our company secrets and the data that we need to protect and customer information to leak out the door. So understanding that kind of portion of the security function is really important. And then taking that back and saying, how can I build new systems that can solve these problems? And you don't have to go out and say, okay, I'm going to build a new piece of software, because that's not the kind of systems we're talking about. We're saying use existing technology that the industry has already built and deployed. There's many security tools out there that offer wide range of solutions to solve almost every single point solution. But if you imagine an environment where you've purchased a point solution for every problem, you probably have at least 10 or 15 tools on your hands, right? And from a security analyst perspective, coming into a new job, you have to know how those tools connect to each other and what they can do to enhance their processes together, right? IAM tools telling you what users have access to is a great tool to have. Everyone needs it. But what other tools could use that information to make their alert stronger or their response processes better? So getting that fundamental and horizontal understanding of that security architecture is really, really important.
Very helpful. In fact, as I listen to you, I almost feel that what you're alluding to is a more holistic understanding of what cybersecurity governance or cybersecurity readiness is all about. So, an understanding how the different tools function, what data gets processed, how this data gets fed into different tools, different systems, and ultimately, what's the end game? What's the goal? That kind of clarity of understanding is critical. Very interesting. I'd like to get back to an incident that you shared during our podcast planning phase. And I'd let you talk about it, but I'll let the ball rolling. You talked about a scenario where it was 3 a.m. in the morning, a global logistics firm's security monitoring system flags a suspicious administrative login. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So I think the overall scenario was one that happens frequently, and it happens around the company architecture, right? It's not just limited to one specific type of alert, whether it's cloud or endpoint or phishing. The number that makes this whole scenario really hurt is that, like you alluded to earlier, and we both talked about, is that detection and attack time is just shrinking. It's going down. And we don't have a way to respond to it quickly. So a 45-minute approval delay, time it takes to log into a system, or if you need to SSH in or use some other login way that is not just through your browser. At this point, we've essentially already lost. And typically for the alerts that really matter, if you're getting hundreds of alerts a day in a security system, one of them a day is really the one that you need to pay attention to. And you need to handle the other 99 fast enough that you can handle the one that matters. And if you're not quickly identifying the one that matters and responding to it because you're dealing with the 99 others, then we've kind of created a little bit of a problem for ourselves. So I often like to say in some of the talks that I've done recently is that we've automated the easy part, which are the detections. Right. And we've created these alarm systems that essentially deliver homework to exhausted analysts. That's the phrase that I really like because it paints a picture of these analysts who are working in SOCs that just have tons and tons of alerts coming in. And when the one that shows up that they really need to pay attention to, they're too exhausted to handle it correctly. And the part I really want people to catch is the failure isn't on the analyst. The analyst is the only person who's actually trying to solve the problem. The security org is the only people within the company who actually are trying to fix this. It's not their fault. But the failure was the process itself, right? It's built for a world where you had hours and you're running kind of circles around these things. But now we're in a world where you only have minutes, right? And we need to fix that and stay clear-headed and use the system to execute that call at 3 a.m. when the alert arrives and not rely on the analyst that's there during the overnight shift who has 99 other problems to deal with.
Very true. As you talk about the incidents and what is needed, I'm reminded of the governance framework that I have been using for a little while now when I advise companies. It's called the Commitment, Preparedness, and Discipline Framework. Its applicability is fairly wide. So when I apply that CPD lens in the context of this discussion, from a commitment standpoint, what comes through is the recognition by the leadership as to what the new model of work as far as security goes needs to be. And you covered all of those important points. Where should humans be in that loop or at the end of the loop? What types of roles should humans play? And what tasks should be automated, executed by technologies? So unless that commitment comes from the top, unless there is that recognition, like this incident that we talked about, that it's a matter of seconds when disaster can not only strike, but have a cascading effect. So there's not enough time for the human in the loop to act and remediate. You almost need tools, automated tools, to take prompt, proactive action. That's kind of where we are in as far as the security world goes. So the organizational leadership, people who mobilize organization-wide support, people who provide resources, they need to recognize this and support and take necessary actions. I'm a big fan of active involvement of the senior leadership. And what does that mean? That doesn't mean that they become experts at security operations. What that means is actively participating in discussions, in deliberations, in deciding how the security process needs to be re-architected so it is aligned with the times. It's not behind the times. And then preparedness, the next pillar of the CPD framework, is really about now, is the organization ready? Has the organization been able to strike that balance in terms of what activities are being performed by agentic AI and what are being performed by people? Have they been able to find that right chemistry? And have they actively rehearsed it to ensure their effectiveness? One of the challenges of using technology is you can't assume that, yeah, I've set it up, smart people have worked on it, they get it, so everything is good to go, we can look the other way. You really can't. You have to constantly test it and make sure the outcome is what is expected. So every part of the security verification, threat detection, remediation, every part of those processes have to be constantly checked, reviewed, improved upon. And that's part of preparedness. Preparedness is much more than that, but I'm referring to some of the ones that make sense in the context of our discussion today. And finally, discipline. Discipline is about sustenance. Discipline is about continuity. And once you've figured out how the process needs to be, you got to maintain it. You got to support it. Whether it is getting the right tools, having the tools synchronized, getting the right platform that coordinates these tools, supports communication across these tools, as well as getting the right people with the right kind of training, providing the other aspect of the infrastructure. So managing the human infrastructure, the process infrastructure, the technology infrastructure in a sustained, consistent manner requires a certain discipline. And that is easier said than done. I've often found in companies where they have brilliant ideas, they start off with some very innovative solutions, but then over a period of time, those processes that work great were no longer as effective. And for whatever reason, the motivation, the drive, the excitement was no longer there to make sure that they again review and rebuild or reinvigorate those processes. So that's been some of my experiences, when I have been engaging with my clients. Now, coming back to you again, Josh. So let's say if you were to advise companies in terms of specific steps that they should be taking, concrete steps. Like I kept talking about commitment, preparedness, and discipline. If you were to translate these into concrete steps, what would they be?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm talking to a board, I'd like to keep it very simple, right? AI handles the noise, so your experts can handle the judgment where it actually matters, the hard, high stakes items. So if we're looking at a roadmap to try to implement this technology, the technology is ready, right? I work with it every day. I see a wide range of customers. Some are using millions and millions of automated actions per year, and they've really automated all the noise out of their environment. And now they're moving on to the really advanced stuff. But to start, you have to find the high frequency, low judgment work. You want to start where that return on investment is obvious and the risk is also low. Because like you were saying with your CPD framework, you have to get that leadership commitment involved, and they have to trust that an automated system is going to help them. Whether it's going to solve all of their cybersecurity concerns on day one, right? That's not something that we're trying to promise here with this technology. What we're trying to do is use it to help do the things that really nobody's going to miss doing, right? The password resets and the things like that are just monotonous, repetitive tasks, onboarding, offboarding, verification of user access reviews. Those kind of things nobody's going to miss. So if we start there, we can build the commitment framework, right? We can start that governance. Next is really defining the clear thresholds. Actually decide, what does high confidence mean for an agentic system in real numbers, right? So an action can trigger on its own without you having to pull people into a meeting or ask for approvals. Once you've kind of done those things, you can move to establishing the guardrails, the boundaries. You want to define the box that your AI agent gets to operate in. If that starts out as read-only access and providing context into all of your alerts, great. That's a good place to start. And as you build out those systems, you will start to naturally trust that the AI is actually able to understand your environment and it knows what it has to escalate. So that is kind of the next step, is those guardrails, and start small. Pilot it somewhere where that controlled low risk action can be done, and then run the agents in like a recommended mode where they just plan out what they're going to do. And then someone can go and approve whether or not that needs to happen. And the teams I see get this right at Blink almost always start in recommended mode, and they let the evidence earn that promotion to act, right? And that's kind of that process here. And what I would recommend to the cybersecurity leadership of these organizations is you really need to invest in your people. You need to retrain your analysts on how to design and supervise these AI systems, and understand that an agent's reasoning is a result of an AI model, and it's not necessarily human thought. So if they make a mistake or they don't look at a problem the correct way, it's often not that, oh, AI can't do this. It's usually that AI doesn't have the information it needs, or it's not given the correct boundaries. So that's how we build these systems, is we look at the answers and we say, okay, it didn't know that this process was malicious. Why is that? Probably because it didn't have the ability to go out and get that process's information. So maybe I need to connect my agent to a new tool. And as you start to build out these systems, you really create that order of how things are done. And people are really step 5 in that last step, but they're in all 5. None of this works if you automate and forget to bring the team along with you, because then your team is going around chasing these automated systems, trying to understand what they do, when in reality, they should be part of the process that builds them, so that they fundamentally understand when the AI steps in and when they're not involved, and where the human needs to be.
Well said. I think I appreciate you clearly delineating the 5 steps to begin the transition to a more effective security operations infrastructure. You talked about identifying the highest frequency, lowest judgment tasks. You talked about defining explicit thresholds before automating. You emphasized the importance of establishing guardrails. You encouraged organizations to start small and run the first automated workflow in parallel with the existing processes before replacing the manual steps. And last but not the least, you emphasize the importance of investing in people. So really what we are talking about today is, we are not trying to suggest that you automate mindlessly. You don't want to automate chaos. You want to understand the existing security process infrastructure, and then bring about, re-architect the changes. Make sure that you are constantly reviewing the latest infrastructure just in case certain tweaking, certain modifications are required. Whenever we are using AI systems, as you said, in an extremely articulate manner, that humans are still creating those systems. You can't blame the technology for going haywire, for not producing the kinds of outcomes that's expected. There's probably some issue there. Maybe the data that is being ingested is not quality data. Maybe the checks and balances that were supposed to be in place to ensure that the model is being trained appropriately, it has not been poisoned, is no longer working. So the AI engine needs to be constantly reviewed, fine-tuned. If you use the analogy of a car engine, that you have to take it for tuning and oil change and so on and so forth. Here we are talking about, instead of the data is the oil in this engine, and to make sure that good data is coming into the system. Also make sure that you cannot wait for 6-7 months, which is normally the case for cars. Here, you have to constantly review every aspect of the AI system, the input, the processing, the output, to make sure that the system is performing as per specifications, and that requires humans. So we are not at all suggesting that technology will replace humans. What we are talking about is let technology do the mundane work, the work that causes human fatigue, so humans can focus on the more creative work and probably the most important work, which is managing the technology, which is providing governance. That's I think, what we are talking about. But anyhow, I'd like you to help us wrap up this episode with some final thoughts.
Yeah. So I think, honestly, the part that BlinkOps is most excited about is that the AI native SOC is constantly validating, adapting, and responding in real time. But the value is that we're teaching humans how to orchestrate intelligent systems, right?
Yeah.
Instead of operating tools by hands, we're teaching people how to do a more interesting job. And it's actually a bigger job, not a smaller one, right? So we're elevating the people that we work with, which is exciting to us because we're able to introduce this new technology that gets people excited. And the thing that'll separate leaders in the future is not going to be who has the most AI running around in their cybersecurity organizations. It's going to be who's able to rethink the human role the fastest. Who moves their best people off of chasing alerts and onto governing and designing these systems. That's going to be what separates a good leader from ones that lag behind. And because your title of the podcast is, right, the readiness and understanding how to prepare yourself for the future and not look back, the age of AI was never about making humans faster. It's about designing systems that are smarter and then empowering the humans on how to guide them. So that's what we're really excited about.
Fantastic. Josh, it's been truly a pleasure and an honor to have you and to have this fantastic discussion with you. I know my audience will gain immensely from listening to what you had to share more than anything else. But I hope I can have you back again in the future to take stock of where we are with improving the security operations infrastructure.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me, Dave. It was great talking to you and always learning from you as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Very kind of you.
The information contained in this podcast is for general guidance only. The discussants assume no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this podcast. The information contained in this podcast is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantee of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness. The opinions and recommendations expressed in this podcast are those of the discussants and not of any organization.